first of all, I want to just finish my previous point, but I would categorically reject that. The fact that there are statements made by political leaders in a vibrant democracy is something everyone can recognize in the democratic world. Judge Israel by our actions and our policy. And our policy is to defeat Hamas and to keep the civilian population of Gaza out of harm's way. We've been asking them to leave with pamphlets, with phone calls, with every single means of technology available to ask them to get out of harm's way. We've been sending humanitarian aid into Gaza by the truckfuls, by land, by air, by sea. We've made sure that there's electricity, that there's water, that there are functioning hospitals. This does not respond with genocidal intent. It's quite the opposite.
I'm afraid I will have to interrupt you there when you know that 90% of homes have been destroyed in Gaza, that there are few functioning hospitals now, there have no sanitation systems, that people are being, as the UN said, deliberately starved there, that there is famine in Gaza at the moment.
That is not true.
And when you talk about issuing evacuation orders, at times that is done, but people are unable to leave. They are trapped in many situations.
I would like to respond to your questions, Lucy. I'm afraid I need to address them because they are important questions and there are facts behind them that are different. There are at least 18 functional hospitals in Gaza, field hospitals and regular ones. The fact that the buildings, many of them, are being destroyed is because Hamas uses them as shields. They attack from high-rise buildings, they hide under hospitals, and so that does not give them protection when they're hiding under civilian infrastructure from a democratic country which is trying to remove Hamas from power.
This is the rhetoric that is often used by Israel. It has been disproved time and time again. When 90% of buildings have been destroyed in Gaza, these are all not buildings that house Hamas operatives. We've seen the forced displacement of people, the blocking of essential aid, water, fuel, electricity. You know these things are stopped from going into Gaza.
Forced displacement is a correct term which we are asking people to move out of harm's way in any other conflict in the world. That is something that is recognized and it's an important step that is taken to protect civilians. In Afghanistan, any other war, when you ask people to move because you're prosecuting a war...
Nina, I have just spoken to someone today who is trapped in Gaza. They can't actually leave. It is impossible for them to leave somewhere like Gaza City at the moment. But can I also ask you about one of the other points made by the UN? That Israel has imposed measures intending to prevent birth. This is another specific thing.
Well, we just keep talking across each other and then neither of us will speak. So I would just say it is absolutely possible for those people to leave and it's important for them to leave to the humanitarian area.
How do they leave, Nina? I'm just curious to know when bombs are raining down on them, when roads are blocked, when there is no transportation, when in many cases they don't have the energy to leave because they're starving.
Well, over 350,000 of them have left, some of them by various forms of transportation. It's 15 kilometers, okay? It's possible to transverse those kilometers, get out of Gaza City and protect them. There's no reason for them to stay in the threshold, in the very epicenter of Hamas's stranglehold of Gaza City. We need to finish this war. We need to get our hostages out. We need for Hamas to be out of Gaza.
Nina, thank you very much for joining us.
Nina
Ben Ami, very good to talk to you, and we will be talking to a wide range of voices on the story throughout the day here on BBC News. So do stay with us. There are also live pages up and running on the BBC News website. And we will also bringing you the latest from Gaza City, where a ground invasion by the IDF is underway at the moment. Many people are fleeing the city, trying to make their way south. More now on the sad news we've had in the last hour and a half or so, that the actor Robert Redford, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood in the 1960s and 1970s, has died. He was 89. He starred in some of that period's biggest films and later turned director and activist. Our arts correspondent David Silito looks back on his life.
I think he was a towering figure in American cinema. I mean, as you've mentioned, I mean, he had a big impact on screen as a kind of old-fashioned matinee idol. He defined a whole era of movie making. But also, I mean, I think his biggest contribution was to independent film. I mean, he co-founded the Sundance Film Festival. Actually, as you just noted, he died in Utah. That is where it has been held. And that was a leading force in independent cinema, showcasing the works of filmmakers from all over the world, but particularly American independent filmmakers. And on top of that, he was a political figure. He was active as a very vocal supporter of Democrats. So all in all, he was, a man who lived a very big life and had a big impact on the screen and really helped a lot of filmmakers along their way, and someone for whom it's going to be a great loss to the filmmaking community. It wasn't unexpected, this news. I had heard that he hadn't been doing so well.
If we can look at his time when he was a star, and we're seeing pictures of him now, Tom, I'm not sure if you can see as well. Was it Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid that really made him a household name?
I think so. That film had a major impact. I mean, he had everything that you would want in a movie star in the days when they were kind of matinee idols. He'd been around for a long time. And I think that he had a great screen presence, obviously a very good-looking man, a very handsome actor, but also a very accomplished actor technically. And although we think about him as an actor, he was also actually a pretty impressive director. He made, I believe, his directorial film debut with Ordinary People, a film in 1980, and that film actually won several Oscars and actually established him as a filmmaker, a director who actually had thoughts. He wasn't just a pretty face. He was a man, who wanted to put things together. And, he developed, I think, as a human being in terms of his creativity as he got older.
I'm just looking at his filmography in front of me, Tom, and you're right, his directorial debut was Ordinary People in 1980. It actually won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and Robert Redford got an Oscar for Best Director for that one, but he never actually won an acting Oscar, did he?
Not as far as I know.
I think he was nominated. He was nominated, I think, for The Sting, but didn't win.
For The Sting, which was a memorable film. But, he's in quite good company. There's several very accomplished actors who never actually got Oscar trophies. And, he was an interesting person. I met him on several occasions. I did interviews with him for the program I do, Talking Movies. And, he was a very thoughtful person. I think sometimes you didn't expect that. Sometimes he was almost too thoughtful because, as journalists, we're rather crass in a way, and we want people to speak in quick sound bites. And he thought very elliptically, but he did think, I think, in a very caring way about the film industry. And I remember asking him about what was more important to him in his life. Was it his screen work, or was it his work with the Sundance Institute and Sundance? And he said it was Sundance. Maybe he was being modest, I don't know, but certainly, Sundance has continued until this day. It still takes place in Park City. Next January will be the last time where it will take place in Park City in Utah, where he died, and it's moving to Boulder in Colorado. But it's still a pretty formidable force. Not as much as it used to be, but in the 1980s and 1990s and right through the turn of the century, Sundance really gathered steam and was the place for independent cinema, and he has to get all credit for that in many ways.
We're just watching pictures of him, archival pictures too, and Tom, he was so cool, not only incredibly good looking as well, but you mentioned his charisma and his thoughtfulness and all the things that he embodied, this kind of thoughtful masculinity that came along with his environmentalism and his activism as well. How influential was he when it comes to the kind of persona that he had, not just on the screen, but also when he was directing and in his real life?
I think he was a pretty influential figure. He mentored a lot of younger people. I don't think he was always the easiest person to get along with, but mind you, how many of us are. But he was certainly very talented, and he was very caring. And, he was very committed to having independent cinema serve as a kind of alternative voice when it was really facing, I think, in the US, right-wing talk radio as a kind of counterbalancing force. I mean, it's interesting because Robert Redford, helped create and foster and nourish independent film, and the right, the right at that time, the political right, didn't have a platform. They had right-wing talk radio. Of course, things have changed totally now, and he was very keen to see that independent cinema gave people a platform for their own views, which might be dissenting views. And it was always, I think, actually exciting for people because you saw interesting cinema emerge at Sundance, which really kept people thinking about what was going on. It's not so much the case now, I have to say, and his presence at Sundance has diminished in recent times. It always used to be that you would go to the festival, he would be there on the opening day press conference, and we always got a sit-down interview with him, I imagine, because we were the BBC or whatever, and he was always actually very good to talk to. And I felt I took a lot away from those conversations with him in terms of his understanding of independent cinema.
Well, it was back in 2009 that Tom actually spoke to Robert Redford as the Sundance Festival began that year, and he talked about the economic challenges in the independent film industry. So let's take a look.
How bad is it?
Well, it's bad. It's bad for the business at large. The fact is it's a terrible time for the mainstream part of the business, except for the big franchise films. That business is no longer what it was. The studio system barely exists, if it does at all anymore. The financial structuring and the distribution is changing. It's going to change to something positive. It just hasn't gotten there yet, because right now it's sort of caught betwixt and between. You've got the internet, you've got online. A lot of distribution is moving onto the online territory. Financing is coming from very different, strange places. It's very much in flux. And the studios basically are just clearinghouses. If it isn't a big franchise, high-budget film, probably not likely you're going to see studios getting involved with this. So it's hard, but it's always been hard.
With the new administration in Washington, with President Obama, what is your plea? What would you like him or his administration to do to boost the fortunes of independent film?
Well, first of all, independent cinema belongs to a larger category that I think needs to be supported, which is art. So what I think the new administration would do would be a tremendous benefit is something just hasn't been done. We don't subsidize art in this country, which seems to be a crime considering other countries that don't have what we have do. And you can see the results of it. So I think we can subsidize art, more money to the NEA. That's been
National
cut,
Endowment.
National Endowment of the Arts. That's been cut to the bone with the Bush administration. I think the mindset is much different with this administration than the one before, and I think they will put money.
How important has independent cinema been in keeping you alive, keeping you engaged? You are 72 years old, but you don't come over as a dried-up movie star. What's kept you going? Has independent film been
great.
important?
Keep talking. It's really great.
Don't take it the wrong way.
Well, just the idea of independent film, I think just keeping it alive because it produces such interesting new ideas. Anything that is on a creative level is going to produce new ideas, I'm going to be excited about. And if I can have a role in that, that pleases me enormously. So Sundance does have a place with creating new ideas and promoting them, putting them out to the public. That whole process excites me.
Robert Redford there speaking to Tom Brook. Well, Wendy Mitchell joins us now, producer of the Sundance Film Festival London 2022 to 2024. It wasn't held in 2025. She's also contributing editor to Screen International. Very good to have you with us, Wendy, as we remember Robert Redford. And Tom Brook was just saying to me earlier, and you could see it in that clip there, he was so authentic, so thoughtful, so intelligent, as well as all of that charisma. What was he like to work with?
I wouldn't say that he was in on our planning meetings for Sundance Film Festival London, but, as a guiding light of the Sundance Institute and Sundance Film Festival, a very supportive presence. I think, as Tom was saying, a very warm man when you got to sit down and talk to him, but just such a guiding light for that institute, that film festival, but also for the whole world of independent film.
How did Sundance change things for the entire industry and for independent filmmakers?
Well, I'd probably like to say, you know, most people around the world know what Sundance is. I mean, my parents probably don't know every film festival I go to. I've heard of them, but it's right up there with Cannes. Sundance as a brand, not just as a film festival, but for independent film. You know, they run so many great programs that I think people don't even realize. There's labs to help train and nurture and support a next generation of talent that can be writers, directors, and these are people from all around the globe that get to have this support, this community that Sundance has built. You know, there's special programs for Indigenous filmmakers, for non-binary filmmakers, I think they support. It's just become a buzzword for film community, independent film, as Tom was saying, that has become sort of a brand and is probably more under threat now than ever before. And Sundance means something.
Wendy, you mentioned your mum and dad, and I wonder, sort of ordinary film goers as well, him being connected to Sundance and championing Sundance, starting it, did that just change how ordinary, if I can use that word, cinema goers engaged with independent cinema? Because it encouraged us to go and look at more challenging work, more personal work, more innovative work.
Exactly. I think the fact that somebody like Robert Redford, who we have to remember was a huge star already when the first iteration of the Sundance Film Festival happened in 1978, and then Sundance Institute in 81. And back then he was a huge household name. People might not know what an independent film is or means, but him lending his legacy to Sundance and to independent film in general, I think just helped open so many doors. Also, he's a guy that was so well respected within Hollywood. We're not just talking about scraping a little bit of independent film money from under the sofa. He could go to the Hollywood studios.
Wendy, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. Thank you so much for your contribution. We're just going to take our viewers now to the US and President Trump.
He'll have a big influence on this when Too Late getting his rates down, I guess. Who knows? You never know with Too Late, but he's done a lousy job. The rates should be much lower, much lower. But I've just signed his document and all of the papers, and Steve Myron is now on.
Did you believe in the independence on the Federal Reserve? Round of fences is now underway in Gaza City. Your reaction to
Well, we're going to see what happens because I hear Hamas is trying to use the old human shield deal, and if they do that, they're going to be in big trouble. They're going to be in big trouble. They put it out 2 days ago that they're going to use the hostages as human shields. That's something that hasn't done for a long time, you know. Let me tell you, if they do that, they're in big trouble.
On the Federal Reserve, do you believe the Federal Reserve is an independent body? What do you think about the independence?
Oh, it should be, but I think they should listen to smart people like me. I think I have a better instinct than him. If you look, all the economists got it wrong. I got it right along with one other people out of 100. So they should listen to people that are smart. Nothing wrong with that. But they have to make their own choice. But they should listen.
Did you speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu?
No idea.
What about the idea of Israel beginning this ground offensive in Gaza City? Do you support that?
Well, I have to see. I mean, I don't know too much about it. I can tell you that if they put the hostages in front of them, Hamas, as protection, as what they call them bodyguards, Hamas is going to have hell to pay.
Your trip to the UK today, what do you hope to achieve?
Well, my relationship is very good with the UK, and Charles, as you know, who's now king, is my friend. And it's the first time this has ever happened where somebody was honored twice, so it's a great honor. And this one's at Windsor. They've never used Windsor Castle for this before. They used Buckingham Palace. And I don't want to say one's better than the other, but they say Windsor Castle is the ultimate, right? So it's going to be nice. But basically, I'm there also on trade. They want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit. We made a deal, and it's a great deal. And I'm into helping them. Our country is doing very well. We've never done this well. We're having trillions of dollars coming because of the tariffs. They'd like to see if they could get a little bit better deal, so we'll talk to them. But primarily it's to be with Prince Charles and Camilla. They're friends of mine for a long time, long before he was king. and it's an honor to have him as king. And you know, I think he represents the country so well. I've watched. He's such an elegant gentleman, and he represents the country so well.
Actor Robert Redford passed away today. Did you hear about
he
that?
did? Wow.
Apparently in his sleep at his home.
Well, that's a good way to go, I guess. But I'll tell you, Robert Redford was great. He had a series of years that there was nobody better. This just happened, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
He died at his home in Utah in his sleep.
Yeah.
And what movie would you say you liked the best in?
Well, you have a lot of them. Honestly, I'd say he made 7 or 8 great movies. They were really great. There was a period of time when he was the hottest. I thought he was great.
On TikTok. Well, TikTok goes dark. Are you going to delay the TikTok ban?
Well, we have a deal on TikTok. I've reached a deal with China. I'm going to speak to President Xi on Friday to confirm everything up. We made a very good trade deal, and I hope good for both countries, but a very different deal than they've made in the past.
What companies are involved? What companies are going to buy
We'll be announcing that. We have a group of very big companies that want to buy it. And, you know, the kids wanted it so badly. I had parents calling me up. They don't want it for themselves. They want it for their kids. They say, if I don't get it done, they're in big trouble with their kids. And I think it's great. I hate to see value like that thrown out the window.
So on auto, can I ask you, so auto executives...
And, you know, you're talking about tens of billions of dollars.
Some auto executives are concerned that compromising the 15% for auto tariffs coming in hurts American automakers. What do you say to...
Well, I haven't compromised anything. Where did I compromise?
Going down to 15% from 25.
Going down to 15%.
From 25.
We charge, well, and where did the 25 come from? It came from there. You tell me. Just so you know, they paid nothing for years. Now they're paying 15%. And some things can pay more, like chips could pay more. Pharmaceuticals could pay more. You know, there's a bigger margin. With a car, you have to make 15% before you make a profit. It's pretty tough. So, but we had a big deal. Don't forget, European Union is paying our country because of tariffs $950 billion. Think of that. We're talking about a year. $950 billion. Japan is paying us $650 billion. These are countries that paid us nothing until I came along. And China's paying us a tremendous tariff. You know what the tariff is, right? You know what the tariff they're paying us? Yeah. What?
Yeah, so it's 30% for the fentanyl as well as whatever for the 301s.
20% for the fentanyl. But the overall is about 55%. Okay? That's as opposed to nothing. Would you say that's a difference? We have a big decision coming up, and if the Supreme Court rules the way hopefully they will, because, I mean, every legal expert said we win that case, but you still have to watch. And the Supreme Court's been terrific. You know, I think they're very fair. All I want is fairness, and we win. But if we win the Supreme Court case, which is the finalization of tariffs, we will be by far the richest country anywhere in the world, and we'll be able to help our people more, and we'll be able to help other countries when we want to. But I will say, if we win that case, our country, you see what we've taken in just on a temporary basis. We've taken in trillions of dollars, trillions with a T, and we will be by far the richest country in the world. There'll be nothing close. And you know, one other thing, we'll have tremendous power to negotiate. The use of tariffs. I settled 7 wars. 4 of them was because I was able to use tariffs.
Hopefully you'll be able to in an interview criticize the fact that some CEOs make hundreds of times more in salary than average workers. He's worried about polarization. Yeah. Do you share that concern?
Well, I do say there's a big gap. I do say that. Don't forget, I'm a popularist. There is a big gap.
Mr. President, it's been a month since a month on, do you think that meeting accomplished what you hoped?
Yeah, accomplished a lot, but it takes 2 to tango also. You know, those are 2 people, Zelensky and Putin, that hate each other. And it looks like I have to sit in the room with them because they can't sit in the room together. There's great hatred there. But no, that meeting accomplished a lot.
Mr. President, you still have complete confidence in Kash Patel. What are you hoping comes from his testimony on the Hill today?
Well, first of all, I think that Pam Bondi has done an unbelievable job, and everybody agrees with that. And Kash, you know, if you take a look at what he did with respect to this horrible person that he just captured. He did it in 2 days. It took other similar cases 4 days, 5 days, 4 years, if you look at certain shooters. Now, I have confidence in everybody in the administration. My administration, and a lot of people are saying it, not just me, it's so far the best administration ever formed. You look at our financial people. Our country is making a fortune. We have to keep tariffs because our country has become successful because of tariffs. We have the case in the Supreme Court. That's a very vital case for the success of our country. It's very vital to negotiate with other countries. And remember, other countries charge us tariffs. That's a very, very big case. And if we win that case, our country will be by far the richest country anywhere in the world. And then we can help our people. We'll get rid of debt. We'll get rid of everything. We can help our people, and we can even help other countries where they need it.
Mr. President, narcotics in Venezuela. Narcotics in Venezuela. President Maduro in Venezuela says that you're getting ready to invade his country. What is his message to him?
Well, I would say this right away. Stop sending Tren de Aragua into the United States. Stop sending drugs into the United States. We knocked off actually 3 boats, not 2, but you saw 2. And the problem is there are very few boats out in the water. There are not a lot of boats out in the water. I can't imagine why. Not even fishing boats. There's nobody. Nobody wants to go take a fish. So it's one of those things. But I would say to him very strongly, stop sending people from your prisons into our country. They're sending their prisoners. They've done that already. So the numbers just came out. Another month with 0 people getting into our country. And these are figures, John, with people like you that would like me to do badly. Nobody has ever done on the border like I've done.
Mr. President, what will you tell President Zelensky if you meet with him in New York?
Well, he's going to have to get going and make a deal. He's going to have to make a deal. Zelensky's going to have to make a deal. And Europe has to stop buying oil from Russia. Okay? You know, they talk, but they have to stop buying oil from Russia.
Mr. President, there are some
regarded to be the wealthiest man who's ever occupied the White House. How much wealthier are you now than when you returned to the White House?
Well, I don't know the deals I made for the most part, other than what my kids are doing. You know, they're running my business. But most of the deals that I've made were made before. And that's what I've done for a life. I built buildings. Like I'm building a building here. You know where I built? You know what? You see that area? Yeah. That is going to be the greatest ballroom anywhere in the world. And for 150, so it gives me pleasure to do it for the country. And I'm paying for it. I'm paying for it. The country's not, and that's an expensive ballroom. I think it'll cost $250 million, and it will be, I think, the finest ballroom. So for 150 years, John, you know this? They've wanted a ballroom. And now they're going to finally have it. And it's going to knock your socks off.
But is it appropriate, President Trump, that a president in office should be engaged in so much business activity?
Well, I'm really not. My kids are running the business. I'm here. You know what the activity, where are you from?
I'm from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Four Corners program.
Well, the Australians, you're hurting Australia, right? In my opinion, you are hurting Australia very much right now. And they want to get along with me. You know, your leader is coming over to see me very soon. I'm going to tell him about you. You set a very bad tone.
Well,
go ahead, John.
Okay, maybe you
can set a nicer tone.
The UAE does a deal. What does it want in return?
Quiet.
Mr. President, what are you hearing about the operation in Gaza, the Israeli operation? Are you concerned?
Well, I'm hearing that they want to go in, and I'm also hearing that Hamas wants to take our 20 hostages plus dead bodies. You know, they have about 32 of them, and they want to put them in the way of any attack. And nobody's happy about that situation. It came out yesterday. I'm sure you saw that. They want to, supposedly they've taken the hostage out of deep caves and tunnels, and they're bringing them, putting them on the front line. Nobody's heard of that one for a few centuries.
We saw that the UN said that Israel is guilty of genocide and have committed acts of genocide in Gaza.
They voted on that?
They have a new report out saying multiple acts of genocide.
When it comes to a vote, we'll see what happens. That'll come to a vote, but we'll see what happens.
And what do you make Pam Bondi saying she's going to go after hate speech? Is that, I mean, a lot of your allies say hate speech is free speech.
We'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly. It's hate. You have a lot of hate in your heart. Maybe they'll come after ABC. Well, ABC paid me $16 million recently for a form of hate speech, right? Your company paid me $16 million. for a form of hate speech. So maybe they'll have to go after you. Look, we want everything to be fair. It hasn't been fair. And the radical left has done tremendous damage to the country. But we're fixing it. We have right now the hottest country anywhere in the world. And remember, 1 year ago, our country was dead. And now Washington, D.C. is fixed, and I fixed it. The mayor was fine. The mayor was just fine, okay? The mayor had the sick city for many years. She's been mayor for many years. The one that fixed it was me and my people, and it is so safe. You should take your beautiful wife tonight and have dinner down there. You won't be shot, you won't be accosted, you won't even be looked at incorrectly by anybody. Washington, D.C. is safe. Now we're going to Memphis, where it's pretty rough, to put it mildly. And then we're going to have to go. A friend of mine who is a big railroader, he stops at all the cities. He knows every city. He said, sir, you have to save Chicago. So I'm going to go to Chicago early against Pritzker. Pritzker's nothing. If Pritzker was smart, he'd say, please come in. So last week, over the last week and a half, 11 people in Chicago were killed, murdered, and 38 were shot. And then Pritzker, and by the way, this is going on constantly. If they lose less than 6 or 7 people a week with murder, they're doing a great job in their opinion. Chicago is a death trap, and I'm going to make it just like I did with D.C., just like I'll do with Memphis. Now, remember this. So a man comes into my office, one of the biggest businessmen. I'll tell you, he runs Union Pacific. Is that big? Biggest railroad in the world, I guess. And he started off as a railroader. He was running a railroad, a little caboose. He was in a caboose. Now he runs the whole damn thing. 45 years ago, he started off in a caboose. I don't know what that's all about. And he became the top, so that's a good place to start. But he came in, he knows the country intimately. He's looking to do a merger by another railroad, the one that where it had the little problem in East Palestine, right? And they want to buy that railroad, as you know, pretty public. But I sat with him and I talked. I said, so you know every city? Yes, sir. I go into every city, and I have for 45 years. I said, where would you go next? He said, St. Louis is in big trouble. He said, but Chicago is a great city. You can save Chicago, sir. Don't let Chicago die. This is a guy telling me with great knowledge and stuff. He said, don't let Chicago die, sir. It's dying. Don't let it die. I'm going to Chicago next.
The UAE, Mr. President. What do you think they want when you do a deal with federal?
Well, I just want something to happen, whether it's federal, state, and most likely it's going to be state. But the question is whether or not we overlap with a federal judge. So they're looking at that. But the state is very competent. The governor's doing a very good job. As you know, they have the death penalty. It's a tough death penalty, too, as you know. But they have the death penalty. So as to whether or not we judge, we will be working with them. We may or may not be able to judge.
And when it comes to the governor of Utah, what do you make of his overall message of nonviolence?
Well, I agree with it. I agree 100%. But most of the violence is on the left.
He said that social media is a cancer.
What?
Do you agree with that? The Utah governor said that social media is a cancer and more people should log off and take some time away.
Well, it's not a cancer in all respects. In some respects, it's great. But there are segments, there are deep, dark holes that are cancerous, absolutely. Beyond cancer, they're death.
How are you going to get China to open their market?
The Supreme Court this morning denied Fani Willis's appeal of your case for moving her from Kingston.
Well, that was a great decision. It was a rigged case to start off with. It's great. The court just ruled that she is a disaster. She's a disaster with a boyfriend. The boyfriend that she paid $1 million for his expertise, but he never did it before. Now, she should be prosecuted. What she did to people, forget about me, what Fani Willis did to innocent people, patriots that love our country, what she did to them by indicting them and destroying them, she should be put in jail. She's a criminal. Fani Willis is a criminal.
Will you apply more pressure to EU and NATO countries not to purchase Russian oil?
I do, but here's the problem. You know the problem. They're purchasing Russian oil. I don't want them purchasing Russian oil, and they've got to stop immediately. Not fair to us. They're purchasing Russian oil, and we have to, do things. Now, the nice part, it doesn't cost us anything anymore. You know that. Yeah. They are buying everything from us, unlike Biden, who gave away $350 billion. We actually make money, but I don't want to make money. You know what I want? I want that war to stop, because last week, 7,018 people got killed. Thank you.
Party was targeted today, just now. You announced 70 patriots in Ukraine 2 months ago.
Where are you from?
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Will they come, and do you know when they will come? The Patriots.
What will come?
The Patriots. You announced 70 Patriots to Ukraine 2 months ago.
Well, look, let me just tell you, I love Ukraine. I love the people of Ukraine. That's why I asked. I thought that was a little Ukrainian accent, but the country's in serious trouble. It should have never happened. It's a war that should have never happened. The country's in very serious trouble, but I'm going to get it stopped. I've done seven countries. I've stopped 7 wars in the last 8 months. I thought that would have been the easiest because I know Putin, but it's not, because there's tremendous hatred between Zelensky and Putin. But we're going to get it stopped.
How soon will you go to the Supreme Court to stop Lisa Cook?
Well, there it is. Donald Trump talking at length to reporters as he headed to Marine One on his way to Air Force One. He is currently in the air, but a whole range of questions. He, of course, is heading to that state visit here in the UK. He said of that visit, I've been a good friend of King Charles for a long time. But in terms of those other areas, on Gaza, the new Israeli offensive, he said, I don't know too much about it. I will have to see, but then went on to give Hamas a warning them against using hostages as human shields. So just some of the many, many questions Donald Trump was asked and answered there in the last few minutes. Let's bring in Rajini Vaidyanathan, who's there at Windsor. Of course, that is where ultimately he is heading. And Rajini, what did you make of what you just heard?
To be honest, Matthew, some of it sounded like the same things that we've heard before. In fact, I got a bit of a deja vu because I remember when President Trump was about to head here to the UK in July and he answered a range of questions. They were on very similar subjects and similar themes. It was interesting, of course, as well that he talked about other things like his pledge to send the National Guard into Chicago. He talked about a range of domestic issues as well. But he did talk a little bit about that state visit as well. Of course, he's heading to the UK once he boards Air Force One. And tomorrow in Windsor will be the main day of ceremony. And in those remarks, of course, Matthew, he described Britain's Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer as an elegant man. And he said that they might refine the trade deal that the US and the UK agreed earlier in the year.
And in terms of those comments about Gaza, the new offensive, Hamas, because, of course, we are watching the events of overnight, the bombardment that we've seen in Gaza City, and, of course, a huge amount of concern for the hostages still being held.
Indeed, and of course, again, just talking about the conversation earlier in the year when he met with Sir Keir Starmer on what was a private visit, not a state visit, but you will, of course, remember that the pair met in Turnberry in Scotland, and the issue of Gaza was high on the agenda there. That's, of course, before that offensive in Gaza City had begun. But you may also remember, Matthew, that the president's tone changed quite dramatically after he'd had that one-on-one conversation with Sir Keir Starmer, and it'll be interesting, of course, to see what conversations the two men have when they hold their talks as part of this state visit. They're going to be meeting in Chequers, so the Prime Minister's residence outside of London, and that is on Thursday.
It was so interesting listening to those questions because we saw a technique that Donald Trump uses a lot of times when he thinks it's a hostile question, questioning where the reporter was from rather than actually answering, because he was asked about, as a sitting president, some of his business links and trade, and he referenced that with saying, I leave that to my sons. But it's so interesting because ahead of this state visit, all sorts of questions may be asked of Donald Trump, and at times there may be critical questions to answer.
Absolutely. It was the Australian Broadcasting Corporation correspondent who asked that question that you referenced there, Matthew, about his family's business links. And he kind of deflected, as you said. It made me laugh in a way because it is part of the president's playbook in some ways. And he has been known, even when he was a candidate through to his first presidency, now his second term, to attack the media when it's a question he doesn't like. And I remember actually in his first term when British reporters travelled to Washington for a joint press conference, and I think one of my BBC colleagues, Laura Koonsberg, asked a question, and he actually made a remark and made a comment to Theresa May about the question, because it was quite a sharp and pointed question, which hit some of the controversies, I should say, that he was facing at the time. I caught most of that press conference, Matthew, but I don't remember if anyone asked him about Epstein. But of course, from this side of the pond, that is something that many people are watching, is of course, because it's only been a few days since the British ambassador to the United States, Sir Peter Mandelson, was sacked. And of course, that has changed some of the organisational aspects of this state visit. And of course, there are still remaining questions about Donald Trump's connections and ties with Jeffrey Epstein as well.
Regina, we will leave it there. As I say, Donald Trump is in the air, heading to the UK for that second state visit. Plenty more on that story ahead in the coming hours. But let's speak live on the programme to Ambassador John Bolton, who was the former US National Security Advisor to Donald Trump in his first term. Ambassador, welcome here to the programme. In terms of that state visit, how do you think Donald Trump will be approaching it?
Well, I think he's very much looking forward to it. I've had the privilege of attending the first state visit with Queen Elizabeth, and he loved every minute of it. He loves the pomp and ceremony at the state dinner in Buckingham Palace. I've said he would have stayed all night if he could have gotten away with it.
Both sides have been stressing the importance of the UK-US special relationship, but I was listening to one political commentator here from the Daily Telegraph, their deputy political editor, who was reflecting on this and the relationship between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, and said Starmer has a good relationship with Donald Trump because basically he's agreed with everything with him so far. Is there truth to that in part in terms of the way leaders are having to approach this US president?
Well, Trump sees everything through the prism of what benefits Donald Trump, and that's why dealing with him is unlike dealing with any other American president. All politicians worry about their political circumstances, but when they're engaged in national security issues, they normally try to think of their country's interest. Donald Trump thinks of Donald Trump's interest, and I think Starmer has done unexpectedly well, and I think the state visit was an important card for him to play in his first meeting with Trump in the White House. When they get together on Thursday, there are going to be some hard issues, particularly Ukraine in the wake of the Russian incursion into Polish airspace with a fleet of drones, and how NATO is going to handle it. So I think this will be a test of the personal relationship. And, with many people, Trump's got a good personal relationship until he doesn't.
Yes, that is absolutely true. In terms of the big issues of the moment, you touched on Ukraine. Can you explain to people watching why you think that Donald Trump has given Russia and Putin so much time? Every time there's an incident, you reference Poland. Donald Trump said that may have been a mistake. There are no sanctions. He very rarely, if ever, blames Russia for starting this war. Why do you think that is?
Well, he thinks he's friends with Donald Trump and with Vladimir Putin, and Trump believes that personal relations really dictate state-to-state relations. That's a gross oversimplification. Putin knows he's not friends with Donald Trump. He's pursuing Russian national interest, and ever since the Alaska summit, if not before, the Russians have proceeded as if they have a free hand, and Trump has not done anything to disabuse them of that notion. I think Starmer will have a tough job in trying to get Trump to take this incursion by the drones seriously, because it is a test of NATO. It's a test of our capability to resist large drone attacks, which we don't have. And it's a test of NATO resolve, which we have not yet demonstrated. So this is potentially a very pivotal moment, I think, in the security of the North Atlantic area.
So how dangerous is it that the whole stance that Trump adopts towards Putin and the seeming never-ending giving him more time?
Well, it could be dispositive. It could be very negative for Ukraine. It could be negative for NATO as a whole. People say, well, it's got to be something more than that Trump thinks he and Putin are friends. There must be money. There must be some hidden control or something like that. I've never seen any evidence of that, but I would add one other factor, and that's that Trump is stubborn. And he's just determined that he's not going to be pushed into doing something against Putin and the Russians he doesn't want to do. In the first term, the U.S. imposed a number of sanctions on Russia for various things they were doing, like selling S-400 air defense systems, very sophisticated system. And it's true we imposed sanctions, but I can tell you from my own time there, we did it over Trump kicking and screaming that he didn't want to do it. That's what motivates him.
That's so interesting, given that, of course, there's that bipartisan effort to get really tough sanctions that still hasn't got to the floor of Congress. Let me ask you about Gaza. Is potentially the same thing happening, that the president is allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to set the agenda? Even the IDF have questioned the wisdom of actually trying to take over Gaza City in terms of its effectiveness against Hamas, the danger it poses, obviously, to the hostages, let alone the obvious human suffering for the thousands of Palestinians now coming under attack.
Well, I think he's basically going to let Netanyahu and the Israelis make their own decisions. Personally, I think that there will never be peace and security in Gaza until Hamas is destroyed. And to say it's not possible, we destroyed the Nazis in World War II. We destroyed Imperial Japan. Japan and Germany are very different today. Gaza could be different in the future, but not until Hamas is gone.
Let me ask you a couple of final questions, not related to what we've been talking about. Do you worry, and how much do you worry, in terms of a lurch to an authoritarian regime in the United States? The FBI sent to your home to raid it, to search it.
Right. Well, I'd love to talk about that, but unfortunately, this is not the moment to do it. I do think Trump is in the midst of a retribution presidency. I predicted that in the new foreword to my book back in January of 24. You know, in my case, on Inauguration Day, normally a pretty busy day for a new president, he found time to cancel my Secret Service protection against Iranian assassination efforts, then canceled protection for others in the next few days. So it's not a shock. This is Trump. You're either for him or against him. You're either yes, sir, or you're an adversary.
I know you don't want to talk about your particular position, but what are the wider dangers there for the US? Because it seems that there is simply no check on the president, certainly not the Republican Party, and so far not the Supreme Court.
Well, I think the judiciary will stand as a barrier if he tries to go further. I'm disappointed we haven't had more Republican opposition, but I haven't given up on it. I think it's coming. And I do think that Trump is a particularly lucky politician. Ever since the election day, the Democrats might as well not have come to work in Washington for all the impact they've had. But this isn't going to go on longer. You know, Trump is the only president in American history in this term who is simultaneously a new president and a lame duck president. And I think we're now past the new period, the honeymoon period, and the lame duck status will be increasingly evident.
Ambassador John Bolton, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us here on BBC News.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a short break. After we return, we're talking about the death of Robert Redford that was announced about a couple of hours ago. That is coming up here in a moment or two. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to today's Verified Live. Now, the actor Robert Redford, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, has died at the age of 89. He starred in some of the biggest films over several decades. Meryl Streep has just described Redford as one of the lions of the industry. He won an Oscar as a director and in later years also became a prominent campaigner. Our arts correspondent David Sillito looks back on his life and career.
I'll jump first. No. Then you jump first. No, I said. What's the matter with you? I can't swim!
It seems amazing now, but at the time, America's leading critics really didn't like Butch and Sundance. But Hollywood didn't care. It was a huge hit, and they had a new star, smelted out of pure box office gold, Robert Redford.
Katie, you expect so much.
Oh, but look what I've got.
Robert Redford had grown up in Los Angeles. He studied acting in New York and, armed with weapons-grade good looks, began sweeping leading ladies off their feet.
If you don't give me a real kiss, I'm gonna give you back your pajamas. Right now.
And then...
Who could complain? However, it seems you can be too good-looking.
The performances I would give would sometimes be overcome by how I looked, how the critic would focus on that rather than more subtle things within the character. And that began to bother me, and then I realized that it was a bit of a cage and that it was really hard to get out of.
And by the time of The Sting, another good-natured buddy movie with Paul Newman, he was keen for something dark and gnarly.
You just worry about your end, kid. If we ever get to it.
The committee to re-elect the president?
Yes.
Robert Redford didn't just star in All the President's Men. He had bought the rights to this tale of how the Watergate scandal was exposed. And he was a guiding hand through its progress to award-winning glory. And after that came a directing Oscar for Ordinary People. Hollywood loved him, but he wasn't too sure about Hollywood. He created the Sundance Film Festival and Sundance Labs to help nurture independent film.
The mainstream cinema is pretty well obligated to finding as commercial a product as it can because of the money, and that's fine. We're not obligated that way because we're a nonprofit. We don't benefit financially from the film, so therefore we just show what's out there and let the audience decide.
In his late 70s, he returned to the big screen with All Is Lost. It is just him and the sea. He barely says a word. A testament to that screen presence. Robert Redford, actor, director, environmentalist, and of course, the Sundance Kid.
David Sillito with that report. Let's speak live to Siobhan Sinnott, film and TV journalist. And Siobhan, welcome here to the programme. As David was saying, one of the real Hollywood greats, an incredible screen presence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I interviewed him in his 70s, and the response I got, I think, was quintessential Robert Redford. He was uncomfortable talking about the sort of leading man roles that made him famous, you know, The Way We Were, The Sting, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Much happier to talk about his passion for the environment, for championing political filmmakers, independent filmmakers, which is of course why he came to establish the Sundance Institute and the Sundance Film Festival, which still continues, of course. And also wry, dry and acerbic whenever we touched upon his private life, even innocuous things about how Scottish he felt, being Robert Redford and me being from Glasgow.
There are so many strands that actually weave together, because I was listening to Tom Brooke, who was just describing his interview with him and talked about how thoughtful he was as both an actor and a director. And on our screen now, an image from All the President's Men. He was absolutely critical, wasn't he, to actually bringing that to the screen?
He absolutely was, yes. No, he championed William Goldman, the scriptwriter, He felt it was an important story. He made a lot of political movies, but he was none more active, I think, than in the 70s. And along with All the President's Men, I would also champion Seeing the Candidate, where he plays a young political idealist who puts himself forward for the system and loses his idealism and indeed his sense of direction as he continues his path towards political success. It's an extraordinary performance, and it's very much reflective of how unvain Robert Redford could be as an actor. He was much more interested in roles where you scraped away the glamorous golden boy looks and looked at a darker heart underneath. You think of Downhill Racer, for example, as another example. And The Great Gatsby, of course, which he starred in. So, I mean, he was an actor of great range. I was very popular in Hollywood. I mean, I think of the fact that Ordinary People, his directorial debut, won an Oscar for Best Picture. Perhaps not the best picture, but very much reflective of the regard that Hollywood held him in. He was a superstar as well as an activist, and those two things don't always go together.
A twin final thought then. He never won actually an Oscar, did he, for his acting? And tell me more about the legacy you think he leaves in terms of the Sundance Film Festival and the sorts of films and directors he encouraged and inspired.
Well, I mean, he said himself that winning an acting award wasn't his priority. He was very proud of the award he got for Ordinary People. He was very proud of getting the honorary Oscar in 2002 as well. So I don't think awards mattered quite as much, as you rightly point out, as the importance of the Sundance Institute and the Sundance Film Festival in championing young, independent-minded filmmakers with ideas and visions and films that really spoke to people. That, I think, is Robert Redford's legacy.
Siobhan, we have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for those thoughts. Now let's turn to the Middle East. Israel has launched the main phase of its operation to take over the whole of Gaza City, expanding its ground offensive. There's been massive bombardment overnight, with locals describing it as a night of hell. Hospitals say at least 43 people have been killed. Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, said on social media, Gaza is burning. Well, it comes as the United Nations-backed inquiry has concluded that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry says there were reasonable grounds to conclude that Israel has committed 4 of the 5 genocidal acts defined under international law. It also concludes the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, the President, Isaac Herzog, and the former Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, deliberately incited genocide. Israel responded immediately, saying the findings are based on Hamas falsehoods and saying it categorically rejects this distorted and false report. Well, with me is Marco Longobardo, who's a reader in international law at the University of Westminster and an expert on genocide and the International Court of Justice. And Doctor, welcome here to BBC News. Let me go back to the absolute basics here. Just for our viewers watching, what is genocide under international law? And just take me through the areas that this inquiry has pointed towards.
Genocide is defined as a legal notion in international law under the Genocide Convention. The Genocide Convention defines genocide as a certain number of acts committed with a specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a protected group. The acts are, for instance, a killing of members of the group, inflicting serious harms to the members of the group, preventing births in the members of the group, or creating conditions of life that are unsustainable for the members of the group. What the Commission inquiry did is, according to the members of the Commission, a finding that Israel has committed these 4 acts with the specific intent to destroy the Palestinians as a group.
And the definition of genocide, it is deliberately a high bar, isn't it?
It is an high bar in the sense that it's not enough the commission of these acts, killings, serious bodily harm, that can be war crimes or crimes against humanity, but it's necessary to have also specific intent, to demonstrate the specific intent to destroy the group. But genocide is not a definition based on numbers. We don't need to demonstrate that there are mass killings to have a genocide. It's important that the perpetrators committed those acts with the specific intent to destroy the group.
So we have this conclusion from today's inquiry, today's commission. How much weight do you think that actually has?
The Commission inquiry is an important body established by the UN Human Rights Council. They are not an international court. It's not a final binding judgment, but it is an important element along with the reports from other UN-mandated bodies, NGOs like Amnesty International and the International Association of Genocide Scholars that point towards the conclusion that Israel might be committing genocide in Gaza.
The ICJ is yet to make their definitive ruling. Would you expect that court to take further evidence from those that compiled today's commission?
I think the ICJ will pay due attention to the report of the Commission inquiry, even if the process is different, because before the ICJ, Israel has the opportunity to voice its own views, to counter evidence produced by South Africa. On the other hand, before the Commission inquiry, Israel decided not to participate at all in the work of the Commission. So the Commission had to use public evidence about Israeli position without being able to rely on Israeli cooperation.
But they could be asked to actually introduce and hand over how they have analyse that information and come to those conclusions. A final thought then in terms of the ICJ, because we are away in terms of them coming to a decision. Why is it taking so long, and what happens in the intervening time?
Unfortunately, it's not taking it that long for the ICJ. The two previous genocide cases before the ICJ lasted respectively 14 and 16 years. There is a huge amount of facts and figures to be assessed, discussed, so it's not this case is not going slower than other cases. In the meantime, we have to recall that the ICJ adopted provisional measures 3 times, 3 binding orders in 2024. Israel should comply with those orders and the international law. Unfortunately, this is not the case.
Doctor, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for being here with us and giving us that analysis. We will have more on all of our headline stories. As you saw a little earlier, Donald Trump has taken off on Air Force One. He is heading to the UK for that second state visit. So plenty more on that story and all of our other headline stories here on today's Verified Life. Welcome back to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here.
I'll jump first. No. Then you jump first. No, I said. What's the matter with you? I can't swim!
Robert Redford, actor, director and icon of the silver screen, has died at the age of 89. Israel's ground offensive in Gaza City begins. As the military moves in, Palestinians flee. These are live pictures on the road south. A UN Commission report concludes Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Israel rejects the findings as Hamas falsehoods. A judge in New York State has dismissed 2 terrorism charges against Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
Uptown, funk you up. Uptown, funk you up. I said uptown.
And he is the name behind some of the biggest hits of the last 20 years. Songwriter and producer Mark Ronson reflects on a life in music. So let's get more on one of those main stories there in the headlines, the death of the Hollywood actor Robert Redford, who has died at his home in Sundance in Utah, surrounded by his family. He was 89. Well, let's speak live on the programme to Michael Feeney-Callan, who was Robert Redford's biographer and who was friends with the actor for over 25 years. And thank you so much for being here on BBC News. It is often said of people of his ilk, they are an icon. It's often overused, but not here.
No, I mean, I'm reeling from his loss, as you say, a friend for so many years. And Bob was someone who was very aware of legacy and very aware of what he represented in terms of American culture and world culture, very aware of the fact that he was trying to introduce, other ethnic voices into the American kind of common voice, so to speak. So thinking of him today, I mean, I just heard that he passed away in what we called the Big House, one of the 3 kind of domestic properties on the Sundance estate. And it's a place I spent a lot of time with him there in these big cathedral ceiling rooms, looking out at the Wasatch Mountains and talking about the frontier and what it was to be American. I mean, we really have lost a kind of an American frontiersman.
I'll come back to some of those thoughts in a moment or two, but can I start with just his career in film? Because I know when you did the biography, you travelled across the United States for many years, talking to many, many people in terms of sources for the book. Just give me a flavour of the types of people you spoke to, the sorts of things that you were able to learn about him.
Well, it was a tough one to get his cooperation. And I said to someone else today that it was only because we found a kind of commonality in our interest in poetry. That is what really kept us connected, so to speak. So it was because I had his endorsement, I was able to speak to Paul Newman and virtually everyone, Jane Fonda, obviously everyone he closely worked with, his family, his friends, and get a kind of a good 360-degree view of who he was. But most importantly, he was spending personal time with him, either in my home in Dublin or in his home or homes in Calistoga in Marin County, California, or indeed Sundance, where his heart was, or in New York. So over the years, we spent a lot of intimate time together. So I got to see him both man and celebrity.
You talked there of talking to so many of his co-stars over the years. When you look at the roll call of films, it is quite something, and the performances. What did they say about why he was so brilliant, so electric on the screen?
Very early on, I said to Bob that, I saw in him a kind of an essayist of America, an Americana. And I likened him to Walt Whitman, whose famous Leaves of Grass was the poem he started writing in his 30s or 40s or whatever it was, and was writing on his deathbed. And I said I saw in Bob's movies, I saw a linearity. He was kind of essaying fragments and parts of America in a kind of a mosaic. So if you look at the films he had a huge authorial role. He was an auteur. He had a huge authorial role in all his films, even back to the very early ones that he did with other, directors like Alan Pakula and Michael Ritchie and people like that. Bob had an author's voice. So whether he was doing Downhill Racer about competitive sports, or The Candidate about politics, or Jeremiah Johnson about the essential nature of the American frontiersman, he was kind of putting together a mosaic. He was aware of it, and he saw it as being legacy. And then Sundance, the institute, and the idea of an independent, promoting independent film, an institute in Provo Canyon, that was a kind of second strand. And they all combined into a kind of Walt Whitman type picture of American life. So I think that was far more important to him than celebrity. Bob saw himself in two bits. He was very good at compartmentalizing. He was Robert Redford, the individual who saw himself as an artist. And then he was this representational figure called Robert Redford with the Beatles haircut. He was very aware of those two distinct characters.
Tell me a little more about when you sat there talking. Obviously poetry, you mentioned that as the unifier, but in terms of how he reflected on his film career, both the directorial roles and acting, because we heard in the obituary piece we were running a little earlier him talk openly about, it wasn't quite irritation, but he recognised people's focus and obsession on his looks, the matinee idol looks, that somehow detracted from the subtleties, the nuance of his acting. How much did that irk him?
I don't think it so much irked him as he was aware. Like I often said, that when you spent time with him, you know, social time, domestic time, there were two Robert Redfords. When he was in the mood to be the kind of public Robert Redford, he went out and about, you know, with a great physique, and he had that great Beatles haircut, and he was accosted everywhere he went, whether we were walking in Dublin or New York or Los Angeles, he would be interrupted. So he was happy to kind of, you know, to be complicit there and be part of that. But he was aware, he said, that that happened by osmosis, that he never intended that to be. But when he didn't want to be Robert Redford, the movie Robert Redford, he wanted to be real, so to speak. He would wear his favorite French beret, because he started as attempting to be a visual painter in the Beaux-Arts in Paris and all the rest. And it was kind of coincidence that he went into acting. So, as he said, osmosis and serendipity, just things happened for him. But we would joke often. He would say, I don't want to be Robert Redford today. And he'd put on the beret and he'd go out. So he would be, I mean, not Robert Redford, the celebrity, but he'd be the real Robert Redford.
What a great story. Let me ask you finally, because you've talked about Sundance, so many people already have talked about the Sundance Film Festival that he set up. What were his thoughts about the sorts of films that generated the sort of influence and inspiration he gave to other directors?
In the last conversation I had with him, he talked about the kind of binary nature of American culture. There was a separateness happening, big division between the left and the right. He hated that. And he saw himself as being someone who, working in that ethnic space and encouraging kind of independent voices, ethnic different voices, of bringing together, accepting the fact that America was the first kind of voluntary multicultural. And he wanted to actively contribute to the articulation of that. And so I know in my last conversation with him that he felt that, he hoped that the legacy of promoting ethnic film and that would help repair that great separation, the great rift in American life that's never been as obvious as it is today.
Michael Feeney, Callan, it has been a great pleasure talking to you. So thank you on this particular day for giving us your time and giving us those thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let me just show you the live pictures from central London, because as we've been saying, and you can see there in the pictures, King Charles attending the funeral of the Duchess of Kent, and the King joining other members of the royal family for the poignant final farewell to the Duchess of Kent, with the mourners filling Westminster Cathedral for the Requiem Mass, a Catholic funeral, and there has been a personal tribute from Pope Leo to the Duchess, hailing her devoted care for vulnerable people and thanking her also for the efforts through a long life in terms of the care. And of course, she was a devout follower of the Roman Catholic faith, converted, the first member of the royal family to convert to Catholicism for more than 300 years, doing that back in 1994. And it was her wish to have this funeral at Westminster Cathedral. Well, those the live pictures just coming in to us here at the BBC of that funeral service. Now, let us head to New York, because in the last little while, a judge there in New York State has dismissed 2 terrorism charges against Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. These images show him arriving at court earlier in the day. He pleaded not guilty to all state and federal charges against him. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in New York, Michelle Fleury. And Michelle, tell us more.
Well, prosecutors had tried to make the case that basically this was a crime committed based on a certain ideology. The judge, in throwing out those 2 terrorism claims, said that he couldn't be charged on those grounds for murder, that this wasn't an act of terrorism. Now, this is a bit of a blow to the prosecution, but that being said, there are still serious charges to be faced here in the court behind me. Not only that, but of course, he also faces separate charges, both relating to when he fled after the murder of the United Healthcare boss in Pennsylvania, but also federal charges in a courtroom just down the road from here, where there he still faces the death penalty.
And Michelle, just in terms of what happens next, the other stages in the various charges he faces, take me through that.
Well, so at the moment, this was a preliminary hearing, and they have set the next court date as December 1st. Now, that's when we should learn when this state case will proceed to trial. The key question, though, is which will go first? What order will all of these cases play out? Because, as I mentioned, there is a federal case against Luigi Mangione just down the road from here. That hearing to set a trial date is December 5th, just days after. At that point, it should be clearer which order these cases will go. And, of course, there is charges in Pennsylvania at the state level related to his attempt to flee after the murder, and they're demanding some kind of hearing on November. So we should get more of an idea, but it does look like sometime next year, and the question is kind of what sequence these will play out, and what are the exact charges, and what are the cases that will be made, what works with judges and what doesn't. And that's why the sequencing, I think, is something that legal experts are paying close attention to.
Michelle Fleury there in New York State. Thanks very much for the latest on that court appearance. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to today's Verified Live. Now, an emergency debate has taken place in the House of Commons today to discuss the appointment process and the circumstances leading to the dismissal of Peter Mandelson. The former UK ambassador to the United States was sacked last week because of his friendship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Well, let's go to Westminster and to our political correspondent Ian Watson. And Ian, for anybody that hasn't seen what has been going on in the House of Commons, just give people a flavour of that debate that we saw.
Well, the emergency debate was secured by the veteran Conservative MP, Sir David Davis, but actually it was also an opportunity for the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, to punch away at the political bruises which Keir Starmer has sustained in recent weeks. So there was a narrow focus to the extent on what people knew when about Lord Mandelson's appointment. The argument was that there was so much in the public domain about Lord Mandelson's past that it was probably the wrong idea for the Prime Minister to appoint him in the first place, but nonetheless there was also a call for documents surrounding the process of that appointment to be made public. But then Kemi Badenoch, if you like, decided to look at the bigger picture rather than the narrow focus on Peter Mandelson, and questioned the Prime Minister's judgment. So she went through a whole range of ministers and cabinet ministers that had to resign, and she went through a whole range of policies on which the Prime Minister had to U-turn. So she was very clear who was in her sights, but also because the Prime Minister himself didn't turn up, it was a Foreign Office Minister who answered for the government, she also suggested that the Prime Minister had no courage and no backbone. Now you'd think after that kind of attack, perhaps the Labour benches would rally round Sir Keir Starmer. And what I found interesting was that wasn't entirely the case. There were some people on the left of the Labour Party standing up and suggesting that Lord Mandelson should lose the Labour whip, in other words, be effectively expelled from the Parliamentary Labour Party. He is part of that because he sits in the House of Lords. And then we had Emily Thornberry, the former frontbencher who was overlooked for promotion by Keir Starmer when he went into government. She now chairs the Cross-Party Foreign Affairs Committee, and they too are going to be conducting their own investigation into the circumstances around the appointment of Lord Mandelson. And she suggested that either the vetting processes were inadequate or that they were perfectly adequate, but that they had been overlooked or bypassed. So that was quite a serious charge, and she said quite clearly a mistake had been made, and she wanted to ensure that something like this wouldn't happen again. There was a little bit of support, which was largely derided in the chamber full of the opposition as well, and the Liberal Democrats also got stuck in with Sir Ed Davey joining Kemi Badenoch, asking for documents around the appointment of Peter Mandelson to be made public as well. So perhaps it was wise indeed for the Prime Minister to have other business to attend to rather than listen to 3 hours of that, which was largely focused on his political judgment, his political management, and a promise by the opposition to continue their attacks until those documents they're asking for are published.
Ian Watson there at Westminster. Thanks very much for that. Thank you. Now, the DJ and music producer Mark Ronson has worked alongside some of the world's biggest stars, Lady Gaga, Adele and Amy Winehouse, to name just a few. Well, now he's published his memoirs about the early days of his career in the 1990s. Our music correspondent Mark Savage has been to meet him at his favourite record shop in London.
With 7 Grammy Awards and 1 Oscar to his name, Mark Ronson is behind some of the biggest hits of the last 20 years. But before all of that, he was a DJ with some slightly different names.
I was Spark Ronson, I was DJ Old English.
And Wrong Way Ronson?
Wrong Way Ronson was just an unfortunate nickname that I got for going the wrong way in the relay at sports day in 4th grade, but it stuck. Every night, you know, I'd be DJing this sort of sweaty, tight-packed VIP room, and I would just see like Prince and Chris Rock and Mariah Carey, and this like parade of people walk past as I was just DJing, and I was like wedged in the corner under basically the stairwell on a plastic foldy like picnic table from Kmart.
But before you get to that stage, the book starts with your childhood here in London.
Yeah.
And one of the first memories you have is of the actor Robin Williams coming to tuck you into bed.
Yes.
How did that happen?
My parents were night people. They had crazy parties at our house all the time. When I was growing up, if I woke up and if I went into the living room, there were like 50, 60 grown-ups smoking, drinking, having a great time, music blasting. So I imagine Robin Williams came back from the club one night, and my mom probably said, "You've got to come into my son's room, you know, he's the biggest Mork and Mindy fan." So they kind of like stumble in, they're all lively, let's say. and I was used to that. I knew grown-ups were more fun at night.
Did he go nanu nanu?
Nano, nano.
Yes, I do remember, like, as he was leaving the room, I was kind of like, you forgot, you know, the thing. And he turned around and he's like, nano, nano, or whatever the hell the thing is.
And you talk later in the book about how when you're DJing, there's a sense of control and that gives you a sense of peace. And I wonder if that's something that came from that instability when you were younger.
Yes, it really, I'm sure it had something to do with it. There was something about the DJ booth that was incredibly comforting. I am an army of one in this place. I make all the rules. No one can come in here.
And when it comes to moving in those circles and you're around Prince and Jay-Z and Mariah Carey, the fact that you'd been around celebrity and music your whole life, does that give you an ease that perhaps somebody else wouldn't have had?
Yeah, no, I don't think it made me like sort of immune to feeling starstruck, but I'm sure growing up around all of it had to have something.
There's definitely an ease though that you have. One of my favourite scenes in the Lady Gaga documentary is when she arrives at your recording studio and drives her car straight into yours. And she comes in and she's panicking and she's saying, Mark, I've totaled your car.
Mark? It's all good. Is it bad?
Yeah. You just seem, you can float above it all a bit.
As a producer, one of your roles is certainly just to make the artist feel great and relaxed and comfortable at all times.
Even when they've trashed your car.
Even when they trash your car. But Lady Gaga is probably one of the most like chased, hounded paparazzi people that you could imagine. And I remember like sometimes we'd be in the studio and she'd slam the door and there were 20 people on the other side of the door like taking pictures and stuff like that. So it's your role as a producer is just to like shut out the outside world.
We only said goodbye with words. I died 100 times.
Back to Black turns 20 next year. What are your memories of that?
The album, we made it all in about 2 weeks. And then she was just such this like, you know, fireball of inspiration when we got in the studio. It was just so quick. You know, we demoed 3 or 4 or 5 songs. We wrote Back to Black. She wrote Rehab, all these things in the 5 days we were together. You know, it's a lot of amazing memories. The truth is, I had no idea where DJing would actually lead me, but I was so lucky because all those years of DJing informed and taught me so much about music.
Well, we're about to take a short break. We'll be back with all the day's headlines here in a moment or two. But I just want to return to the scenes we've seen at Westminster Cathedral a little earlier in the last hour, because the funeral has taken place of the Duchess of Kent and King Charles there with other members of the royal family. Also there, the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Princess Royal, the Duchess of Edinburgh, Queen Camilla absent, suffering from acute sinusitis, and there was a personal tribute during today's Requiem Mass from Pope Leo, hailing her devoted care for vulnerable people over many decades. So the Requiem Mass taking place, a Catholic funeral. She, of course, had converted back in 1994, the first to convert to Catholicism in more than 300 years. So those, the pictures from a little earlier. As I say, I'm back with more of the day's headlines here on BBC News in a moment or two. Live from London, this is BBC News.
I'll jump first. No. Then you jump first. No, I said. What's the matter with you? I can't swim!
Robert Redford, actor, director and icon of the silver screen, dies at the age of 89.
I'm Neda Tawfiq, live in Sundance, the town that Robert Redford adopted as his home and started the Sundance Film Festival.
Israel's ground offensive on Gaza City begins. As the military moves in, Palestinians flee. These are the live pictures on the road south. A UN Commission report concludes Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Israel rejects the findings as Hamas falsehoods.
As Israel launches its expanded military operation, at BBC Verify, we're examining satellite imagery showing Israeli troop presence build up while Palestinians flee the city.
Donald Trump sets off for his second state visit to the UK, but what kind of welcome will he actually receive? And a judge in New York dismisses 2 terrorism charges against Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Hello and welcome to BBC News. The actor Robert Redford, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood in the 1960s and 70s, has died at the age of 89. He starred in some of that period's biggest films and later turned director and activist. Here's our arts correspondent, David Silito.
I'll jump first. No. Then you jump first. No, I said. What's the matter with you? I can't swim!
It seems amazing now, but at the time, America's leading critics really didn't like Butch and Sundance. But Hollywood didn't care. It was a huge hit, and they had a new star, smelted out of pure box office gold, Robert Redford.
Katie, you expect so much.
Oh, but look what I've got.
Robert Redford had grown up in Los Angeles. He studied acting in New York and, armed with weapons-grade good looks, began sweeping leading ladies off their feet.
If you don't give me a real kiss, I'm gonna give you back your pajamas. Right now.
And then...
Who could complain? However, it seems you can be too good-looking.
The performances I would give would sometimes be overcome by how I looked, how the critic would focus on that rather than more subtle things within the character. And that began to bother me, and then I realized that it was a bit of a cage and that it was really hard to get out of.
And by the time of The Sting, another good-natured buddy movie with Paul Newman, he was keen for something dark and gnarly.
Just worry about your end, kid. If we ever get to it.
The committee to re-elect the president?
Yes.
Robert Redford didn't just star in All the President's Men. He had bought the rights to this tale of how the Watergate scandal was exposed, and he was a guiding hand through its progress to award-winning glory. And after that came a directing Oscar for Ordinary People. Hollywood loved him, but he wasn't too sure about Hollywood. He created the Sundance Film Festival and Sundance Labs to help nurture independent film.
The mainstream cinema is pretty well obligated to finding as commercial a product as it can because of the money. And that's fine. We're not obligated that way because we're a nonprofit. We don't benefit financially from the film. So therefore, we just show what's out there and let the audience decide.
In his late 70s, he returned to the big screen with All Is Lost. It is just him and the sea. He barely says a word. A testament to that screen presence. Robert Redford, actor, director, environmentalist, and of course, the Sundance Kid.